Yo, what's up guys, Alf here, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of a deck that I've recently used to get top 10 with on the arena ladder. Now before I get into it, there's going to be a Scryfall link down in the description, and if you click on that it'll have the full deck list there that you can just easily import into arena if you want to try the deck out for yourself. And as usual, I'm not going to be reading out the text on every single card, otherwise the video would go on for ages. So if you don't know what any of the cards in the deck do, just quickly pause the video, fire up the Scryfall link and have a quick read of any of the cards that you're unfamiliar with. So with that out of the way, this is my Esper Release to the Wind Inquisitor Captain deck in Historic. So Release to the Wind, you might not be familiar with this card. It's a 3-mana instant. It says exile target non-land permanent, and for as long as this card remains exiled, its owner may cast it without paying its mana cost. So the main reason that we're interested in this is that it combos really nicely with Valki, God of Lies. So we can play Valki as a creature on turn 2, have a look at the opponent's hand and potentially exile the creature. And then if we exile it with Release to the Wind, we can play the backside Tibalt Cosmic Imposter for free on turn 3, which is so powerful. You know, the cost reduction on Release to the Wind also applies to the backside of these modal double face cards. So using Valki plus Release to the Wind, we can get Tibalt down on turn 3, which, like I said, is so strong. You know, they had to change the Cascade rules in Modern because cascading into Tibalt on turn 3 was so strong. So getting to do it in Historic is really, really powerful and can win the game on its own. Now, Valki is a reasonable enough card on its own, but the real deck building challenge with this combo is finding a shell where Release to the Wind also has another use. Because if you just have Valki plus Release to the Wind in a random shell, you know, maybe you're playing it with control, Release to the Wind is just going to be a card that does basically nothing unless you have the Valki. So I've been testing this out in a lot of different shells, and the Inquisitor Captain Blink shell seems like the perfect home for it, because not only can we use Release to the Wind to combo with Valki, we can also use it to blink our Inquisitor Captain and any of our other creatures as well, which gives us insane value. You know, getting to blink Captain is one of the most powerful things you can do in the format. And additionally, we can also use Release to the Wind to protect Inquisitor Captain from sweepers, which is something that even Ephemerate can't do. You know, if we have a full board of creatures and the opponent has a Wrath of God, we can Release to the Wind the Inquisitor Captain and then play it for free the following turn, which protects it from the sweeper. So Release to the Wind is really nice in the deck because it's flexible to combo and also just give us value. But even on top of that, we can also use the Inquisitor Captain to find the Valki as well, which increases the consistency of us finding the combo. So Inquisitor Captain itself, the main problem with the decks that it's in, you know, the Bant Blink decks have been popular just after Alchemy came out, but I really don't think it's a good choice on the ladder right now, mainly because of Hushbringer and Strict Proctor. Now Hushbringer, the Bant Blink doesn't have the Bant Blink deck doesn't really have any good ways to beat. Thankfully Hushbringer isn't that popular, you know, it's only really run in auras and maybe out of the sideboard of white decks like Enchantress. However, Strict Proctor is everywhere at the moment. I think the Blue-White Lotus Field control deck is probably the most popular deck on the ladder right now. And the Bant Blink deck, other than just piling stats onto the battlefield and forcing the opponent to sweep and then hoping that their following threats don't get countered, the Bant Blink shells just don't have good ways to beat Strict Proctor. And considering that Lotus Field is probably the most common deck on the ladder right now, I don't think the Bant Blink deck is a good choice right now. But running Valki plus Release to the Wind in the Blink shell not only gives you something to do that gets around the Strict Proctor or Hushbringer. You know, getting to resolve a Tibalt on turn 3 against the Strict Proctor control deck is usually going to be good enough to win the game on its own. But we can also use the Tibalt to exile the Strict Proctor or the Hushbringer. You know, even if we're against an Auras deck, if they play Hushbringer on turn 2, we can just go Valki, Release to the Wind, and then use Tibalt to exile the Hushbringer as well. So Valki plus Release to the Wind, not only does it fit perfectly with the Blink shell, but it also helps to solve the biggest problem that the Blink decks have at the moment as well. So Inquisitor Captain itself, if you've not played with this card, super strong, 4 mana 3/3 with Vigilance, and when it enters the battlefield, if there are 20 or more creatures with mana value 3 or less in our graveyard, hand or library, we get to give, the game gives us 2 for free, and then we get to pick 1 to put into play. So, you know, on a par with Collector's Company at a base rate, but when we pair it with Clone and Blink effects, it gets out of control. So we've got 4 Glasspool Mimic, which can clone the Captain. So if we play Captain, hit Mimic, we can clone the Captain, which will gets us another 3/3 with Vigilance, and then we get the effect again. And similarly, Charming Prince and Soul Herder can both blink the Captain. So if we hit either of these, we can blink the Captain and then go again. So it's very easy for us to swarm the battlefield with Captain. Really, really strong card. Then the other cards in the deck, we've got 4 copies of Thoughtseize, which is another real advantage of getting to play black here. You know, Thoughtseize is one of the best cards in the whole format, generically good against most decks, but it's also really nice at shoring up probably the two weaknesses of the Blink decks in general, which is versus control and the spell-based combo decks. So like I said, Strict Proc to Lotus Field control is a difficult matchup. Even the Jeskai control decks that aren't running Strict Proctor are quite difficult, and Thoughtseize is a perfect card against those sorts of decks. Additionally, decks like Indomitable Creativity and Emergent Ultimatum, spell-based combo decks that don't commit to the board are also really difficult matchups, and Thoughtseize is at its best against those as well. So Thoughtseize, generically great card, but also helps to shore up those trickier matchups for the Blink decks. Then we've got 4 copies of Charming Prince. Like I said, this is perfect with Captain because we can just blink it and get the effect again, but all 3 modes of this are really relevant. The Scry 2 is great in the early game at making sure we hit what we need. Gaining 3 life in this particular build is actually probably more important than the Bant Blink shells, because we do bleed a lot of life through other effects. We're losing 2 life to Thoughtseize, we lose 1 life off the draw effect for Dusk Legion Zealot and Callous Blood Mage as well. So having the ability to gain 3 life just to stabilise against those decks that can punish you for being at a low life total is great. And we can obviously blink it with stuff like Soul Herder as well to keep gaining life over and over again. So Charming Prince, really important card in the deck. Then we've got 2 copies of Fibblethip and 2 copies of Dusk Legion Zealot. So these are basically just 2 drops that draw us a card. This is the one weakness of running Esper instead of Bant, that we don't have access to Wall of Blossoms or Elvish Visionary. Fibblethip does essentially the same thing as those 2, but since it's legendary, I don't think you can really afford to run the full 4 copies. So we're having to do a split with Dusk Legion Zealot. Obviously, the fact we have to lose a life off the Dusk Legion Zealot is a drawback, but it's the best option that you have in black, and it's not really that much of a cost anyway. So got these 2 mana draw effects that just help us to make sure that we keep hitting land drops, dig to what we need, and then we can also blink them with our stuff like Soul Herder and Charming Prince as well. Then Valky, mainly here to combo with Release to the Wind, but like I said, playing this on turn 2 is a pretty reasonable card and can get us good value against the creature decks anyway. And even though they do get the card back when it leaves the battlefield, blinking this isn't the worst thing, because we can play Valky on turn 2 against the creature deck and take one of their early game threats, and then later in the game we can blink it with something like a Soul Herder. They'll get the early game threat back, but then we can look at their hand again and take maybe a late game threat that's more relevant at that stage in the game. Now, the backside, we aren't running red mana in the deck to cast Tybalt. In a lot of the decks that were playing Valky in the past, you would run a few red sources so that you can cast Tybalt in the late game, but that has never really happened. I've never got to a point later in the game where I've needed to, and since we're playing a 3-colour deck, we're running 20 lands plus 4 Glasspool Shores. I don't think we can really afford to run any red sources. And like I said, it hasn't come up that we've got to that stage of the game and wanted to cast the backside. So I think it's fine not having red mana in the deck, because we're mainly just going to be using Valky with Release to the Wind anyway. Then 4 copies of Skyclave Apparition. Really important in these blink shells at being able to deal with the aggressive decks. And, a lot of the value generating decks like the food decks, this is great against as well. The ability to exile something and then blink it with Soul Herder and just keep removing the opponent's threats is really, really powerful, and it's just a really important card to have against the creature decks as well. Glasspool Mimic, like I've said, works as both a land, but also really good at copying Inquisitor Captain. Callous Blood Mage is a really nice card in the blink shell as well. Now that we're running black, we get to run this. So it has 3 different modes. The 1/1 is really nice at being able to stabilise against the aggressive decks, and gaining a bit of life against decks like Phoenix, Burn, or Cat Oven decks is really important as well. The ability to draw life and draw a card and lose a life is just really nice ways to keep the cards flowing. At worst, if we don't need the 1/1 and we don't need to exile the opponent's graveyard, we can just replace Callous Blood Mage with its own ability, which is nice here. But the ability to exile the target player's graveyard is really nice as well. A lot of decks have graveyard synergies going on. Phoenix is everywhere at the moment, and there's a lot of other decks that are using small graveyard synergies. So having access to main deck graveyard removal off the Callous Blood Mage that we can use over and over again with the Soul Herder is really nice. So in a blink shell, Callous Blood Mage just gives us a lot of flexibility. Soul Herder, like I said, very powerful with Inquisitor Captain, but also just works really nicely with all the other ends of the battlefield abilities we've got going on as well. And then the mana base, nothing too special going on here really. 20 lands plus the 4 Glasspool Shores, 24 in total. And with the ability to scry off the Prince and draw off Fibblethip, Dusk Legion Zealot and the Callous Blood Mage, I never really struggle hitting land drops in this deck. The lands themselves, I'm only running shocks, pathways and slow lands, the fast lands in Concealed Courtyard, which basically means that we're always going to have untapped lands for the first 3 turns of the game, which is really nice. So yeah, that's the main deck. I've been really happy with it, and I think, the Blink decks are really powerful, but with the amount of Lotus Field decks in the format right now, I don't think you can afford to play the Banch Shell. But running Valky, Release to the Winds, like I said, really helps to solve that problem. And having this in addition to the amount of card advantage we can generate off the Captain and the other end of the battlefield triggers is really difficult for a lot of decks to beat. Then onto the sideboard. Starting off, we've got 4 copies of Adante Vanguard and 3 copies of Fleeting Spirit. Now these might look like weird inclusions in a Blink Shell, but these are here pretty much exclusively for the control decks, specifically the Lotus Field control decks. Now I've been playing a lot of the Heliod combo deck recently, and I'm going to be posting an updated list of that at some point in the near future. But that is another deck where the strict proc to Lotus Field control decks are by far and away the worst matchup. And so I've been trying out a million different sideboard options to try and improve that matchup. And what I've found is the best way to beat that matchup is by having 2 mana threats that can attack through strict proctor and dodge a reasonable amount of removal as well. Because that matchup against the Lotus Field decks is all about tempo. They have such a strong late game, and they can get there relatively quickly, that you need to get underneath them and you need to start attacking them aggressively. And so I don't think you can rely on 3 mana cards, because if you're going second and they Archmage's Charm whatever 3 mana card you're relying on using to beat the control decks, you're usually so far behind at that point that you're not going to be able to come back from the game. So I really like running 2 mana cards, because even if you're going second, you can resolve it underneath an Archmage's Charm. Secondly, they need to be able to attack through strict proctor. It's another reason why I'm not very high on Thalia right now, because you can very easily play Thalia on turn 2, but if they have strict proctor, you just can't attack with it. And, since they're very good at ramping with the Lotus Field, often the tax effect doesn't really matter anyway. And like I said, it's all about tempo. We need to be attacking in early. So you need to make sure that whatever threat you're bringing in against control can attack past the strict proctor, so it needs to be attacking with 3 power. And then finally, you need to be able to have creatures that can dodge removal to a certain extent as well. So first of all, we've got Adante Vanguard here, 2 mana 1/1, and when it attacks, it's a 3/1, so it can attack through the strict proctor, and we can pay 4 life to give it indestructible. So this fulfills basically all those criteria. We can attack through strict proctor. They can't really block with it effectively, because we can just give the Adante Vanguard indestructible by paying 4 life, and then they lose the strict proctor. And additionally, it dodges all of the commonly played distraction effects that they run, like Fateful Absence, Wrath of God, Day of Judgment, stuff like that. The downside of Adante Vanguard is it does die to Portable Hull and Divine Purge. Now, Portable Hull has been on the downswing recently, especially in the Lotus Field decks, because Strict Proctor plus Portable Hull is kind of a nombo. They have to pay 2 mana to their own Strict Proctor tax in order for Portable Hull to work. So I've not really seen much Portable Hull recently. And Divine Purge is a problem for this card, but you can't, Adante Vanguard can't dodge everything. It's kind of the best option that we have in this case. And even if they do Divine Purge, if they already have a Strict Proctor on the battlefield, it also removes the Strict Proctor, which then allows us to play our into the battlefield triggers. And even paying this, if they Divine Purge, playing this again for 4 mana is still a reasonable play, because then they need to find another answer to it, which can be quite tricky. And that's all assuming they have Divine Purge in the first place. So Adante Vanguard fills all that criteria that we're looking for as a good answer against the Lotus Field control decks. Similarly, Fleeting Spirit, very similar to Adante Vanguard, 2 mana 3/1. We can pay 1 white and exile 3 cards from our graveyard to give it first strike, and we can discard a card to exile it, and then it comes back at the end step. So this also does dodge a lot of the removal like Adante Vanguard, but it also dodges Portable Hull and Divine Purge, because we can just discard a card to exile this and bring it back again. So it dodges basically every single removal that they can run. The downside of this, however, is that we often won't have we often won't have 3 cards in our graveyard in the early game. So if the opponent does have a Strict Proctor and we're attacking with this on like turn 2 or 3, they can just trade it off, and unlike Adante Vanguard, we can't give it indestructible, or we won't be able to give it first strike in the early game because we won't have 3 cards in our graveyard. Now, usually that's a trade that we're happy to make, but it does give it a slight weakness that Adante Vanguard doesn't have. The other big weakness of this, though, is that it dies to a Shark token in the early game. If we land this on turn 2 and attack into 3 open mana, the opponent can very easily just pay 3, make a 1/1 shark, and then trade off with it. And like I said, we're not going to have 3 cards in the graveyard in the early game to give it first strike. But outside of this is really strong. The other obvious downside of this is that having to discard a card rather than paying 4 life to protect it is a lot worse, especially against the control deck. And that's the main reason why I'm running 4 Vanguard and only 3 Spirit, because having this in multiples, especially against sweeper effects, can be quite problematic. Because, you know, say we have 2 or 3 of these out and the opponent plays a Divine Purge or a Wrath of God, we then have to discard 2 or 3 cards to protect it. But outside of that, these are definitely the 2 best options that I've found for dealing with the strict proc to Lotus Field control decks. And like I said, I don't think you can afford to be running any creatures that rely on Enter the Battlefield triggers in that matchup, because the main weakness of the Blink decks to those Lotus Field decks is strict proctor itself, and this plays around that. Then we've got 2 copies of Grafdigger's Cage. So we've already got Graveyard Hate in the main deck with Callous Blood Mage, but having 2 Grafdigger's Cage gives us additional Graveyard Hate against those all-in graveyard decks, you know, stuff like Reanimator and Dragonstorm. But Callous Blood Mage also doesn't work effectively against the Cat Oven decks, really, because we can play Blood Mage and exile the opponent's graveyard, but they can just bring back the familiar in response. So Grafdigger's Cage gives us a way to slow down those Cat Oven decks, stop their Cat Oven loops, and basically just buys us enough time, because against the food decks, getting Apparition plus Soul Herder is usually good enough for us to win, but we don't always have that. So Grafdigger's Cage will just slow them down, and by the time they've found an answer for it, we'll usually have gained enough card advantage that it will put the game out of reach for them. Additionally to Graveyard Hate, it also gives us protection from stuff like Collected Company, and also, you know, cards that the Blink decks struggle to beat, like Muxus as well. So Grafdigger's Cage is just really nice at shutting off graveyard decks and stuff that plays off the top of the library, like Collected Company and Muxus as well. Then we've got 2 copies of Cerulean Drake. This is mainly here for the Is It Phoenix matchup. The biggest weakness of the Blink decks to Phoenix is Arclight Phoenix itself. You know, we have Skyclave Apparition that we can use to deal with basically all of their other threats outside of Storming Entity. But if they can keep getting Phoenixes back from the graveyard and force through a bunch of damage in the air, that's the main way we lose. So having Cerulean Drake as just a way that not only dodges basically all of their removal spells, but also just blanks their Phoenixes in the air. And there are also, you know, a bunch of burn decks I've faced. I've seen some mono red dragons decks on the ladder recently as well. So Cerulean Drake just helps in general against those red decks at just stopping them dealing us damage in the early game and giving us time to set up our card advantage engines. Then we've got 2 copies of Blight Beetle. This is here pretty much exclusively for the Heliod combo, because that can also be quite a tricky matchup. You know, Apparition plus Soul Herder is a great way to stop them comboing off, but if they have a fast start and we don't have access to Apparition plus Soul Herder, they can often combo off before we can set up our advantage engines. So Blight Beetle stops both their counters on Trelisara and Voice of the Blessed, but also the counters that they put off Heliod, so it completely shuts off their combo. And kind of like Grafdigger's Cage versus the food decks, this just slows down the Heliod decks until they can find an Apparition, and by that point we'll have usually found our Apparitions and Soul Herders and be exiling all their stuff anyway. So Blight Beetle slows down the Heliod deck a lot, and also just provides us good advantage against aggressive green decks as well. And then finally we've got 2 copies of Deputy of Detention. First of all, against decks that generate tokens, you know, stuff like Goblins creating Krenko tokens, and the Heliod deck, you know, Deputy of Detention gives us a way to beat the Heliod deck after they've comboed, because we can just exile all their squirrels and then keep bouncing Deputy of Detention every turn to keep exiling all the squirrels that they make. But it's also just nice in any matchups where we just need additional removal, you know, especially if we're playing against a deck that has threats that Apparition can't hit. Like I said, I've been facing a few Dragons decks where they're running stuff like Glorybringer or Terror of the Peak, so Deputy, just additional removal in the matchups where we need it. So that's the deck. I've been really happy with it. I think it's a really cool way to approach the Blink shell, and I think it solves a lot of the problems that the Blink deck has at the moment. If you've got any questions at all, drop me a comment below and I'll do my best to answer you. Now onto the gameplay. I've just got a couple matches that I played on the ladder so you guys can see the deck in action. So I hope you enjoy. Okay, sweet, here we go. Okay, so going second here. Right, let's have a look. I mean, this is close. I think we can probably do better, though. Having double Valky's not great. This isn't great either, but I think on a 6-card hand, we probably have to keep this. You know, it's not too bad. We have a lot of potentially good draws here. You know, we've got Soul Herder, so any of our other enter the battlefield creatures are a good draw. We've got Release to the Wind as well, so both Valky and Inquisitor Captain are good pairings with that as well, you know, especially Valky. So we do need some help with this hand. You know, we need to draw something with an enter the battlefield trigger to use with Soul Herder, or Valky would be a sick draw with Release to the Wind here, but I think we're keeping this and we're going to put back a Glass Pool Shore. See what the opponent's on here. Okay, Hallowed Fountain tapped, so probably control, I'd imagine. Which, I mean, we're not particularly well set up to beat at the moment, but there are a lot of good draws we've got here. You know, like I said, anything with an enter the battlefield trigger on turn 2 would be great with Soul Herder. Valky would be a sick draw if we could, you know, if we can resolve Valky on turn 2, and that, wow, okay, sick. So if we can resolve this, we can try and Release to the Wind. Okay, they had Dry Disruption. Okay, that's a little bit annoying, because the great thing about Release to the Wind, it's an instant, so we can wait for the opponent to tap out, then Release to the Wind the Valky, and then they have to keep removal up the entire, well, they have to keep mana up for counter spells the entire time that Valky is exiled, which means they can basically not afford to tap out for anything for the first 4 or 5 turns of the game. Okay, so we're pretty happy to see a Fateful Absence there, considering we have a second Soul Herder in hand and nothing to use the first one with. Okay, farmland. So they might have Lotus Field here, or they're digging for lands. Okay, they got Lotus Field. Looks like they got messed up by auto tapper there slightly. Oh wow, Valky's a great draw. I think we probably want to go Soul Herder here, and then play the Glass Pool Shore tapped, and then if they tap out for anything next turn, we can just go Valky Release to the Wind. So this is probably the key turn in the game here, I think. If they tap out, I think we've got a great chance of winning. Wow, they do. Okay, sweet. So we get to Valky, look at their hand, and then Release to the Winds and get Tibalt down. So they've got Portable Hole, Memory Deluge, and Archmage's Charm. They've got basically nothing that can deal with this Tibalt then, which is sick. I think, you know, Teferi off the top is probably the only way they're going to be able to beat this now. I guess Fateful Absence as well. Okay, so they just drew a land. So we hit Charming Prince, Shark Typhoon. Shark Typhoon's great, but they've obviously got the counter spell for it already. But, I mean, Tibalt's just going to run away with this game. Getting to uptick for a second time is huge here. So we'll uptick again. Oh wow, we hit an Archmage's Charm. Okay, I'm pretty sure we're just going to win this now, because we can just hold up Archmage's Charm during their turn, counter Teferi, and that's, or Fateful Absence is basically their only out, so we'll Fibblethip here. Wow, Thoughtseize is a great draw. I mean, we could play the land first here, but we're going to we want to hold Archmage's Charm up during their turn. I don't think we'd counter anything they'd cast in response to Thoughtseize. So they do Deluge here, but that's fine because we get to see whatever they Deluge and potentially take it anyway. Okay, so they got 2 Teferis. I mean, I think we just take the Archmage's Charm here, stop them trying to do a counter spell war, and then we just hold up our Archmage's Charm here, and we're gonna be ultimating Tibalt next turn anyway, and there's nothing they can really do about it. So, okay, so they play the 4 mana Teferi. I mean, I think we just counter this, right? And then we can just ultimate next turn. Okay, no Portable Hole. Yeah, we can ultimate, and then we've got Thoughtseize in our graveyard. Archmage's Charm. What else have they got in their graveyard? Let's have a quick look. Double Archmage's Charm. I mean, yeah, I don't think they can beat this. So we'll ultimate here. And we'll lead on a Thoughtseize to strip that Teferi, see what else they've got. And then we can, yeah, I was going to say. Sweet, so we got those with Tibalt game on. Against Lotus Field Control, we want Vanguard and Fleeting Spirit. Probably cut Apparition. And, Outside of that, I think Blood Mage is probably the other weakest card. You know, we're not interested in the 1/1 or the exiling the graveyard, so Blood Mage kind of acts like just a slightly worse Fibblethip or Dusk Legion Zealot in this matchup. Trying to think if there's anything else we want in here. I mean, Deputy of Detention can work as additional removal, but it's so vulnerable to as removal for something like a Teferi, but it's so vulnerable to any removal. I don't think it's good here. But yeah, I like the way this deck's set up against control. We have Thoughtseize, we have Valky Release to the Wind, which means the opponent kind of always has to keep mana up to stop that. And we also have Vanguard and Fleeting Spirit to get underneath them, so my experience of this deck versus Lotus Field Control has been really good so far, which is one of the main reasons why I'm much higher on this build than the Bant Blink decks, because, you know, considering Lotus Field is one of the most popular decks right now, that matchup just feels awful from the Bant side. Okay, sweet. This hand looks good. You know, slightly land heavy, but double Vanguard is great here. If we can force one of them underneath Jwari Disruption, that could win the game on its own. And we got Blood Mage as well here, just to keep the cards flowing, which is nice. Okay, Glasspool Mimic's not the best draw, but I think this hand is riding on these Vanguards being good. Okay, tap land is great to see there, because it means we can definitely resolve this first Vanguard. And then we can also play a land, and oh wow, and another tap land. So we can definitely resolve the second one now as well, because we can play a land to play around Jwari Disruption. Okay, Valky's interesting. Now Valky, I mean, obviously it's not great because they're basically never going to have creatures, but getting to see the opponent's hand and just having a 2/1 beta, in addition to comboing with Release to the Wind, is decent, you know. Just getting to see what the opponent has can make a huge difference in making educated decisions, so we'll attack him with the Vanguards here. And then I think we'll probably play the Blood Mage here. We'll definitely play an untapped land first, because we still want to play around Jwari Disruption. You know, we have enough lands that we can afford to keep playing around it here. And we'll definitely draw a card and lose a life. You know, we could make a 1/1 token and then present lethal, but there's no way they don't have any interaction here. Yeah, Deluge. Yeah, there's absolutely no way they don't have any interaction here. So I think we're much better off drawing a card than potentially winning this turn if the opponent has literally nothing. Okay, so they Teferi. Are they going to minus or are they going to plus here? Okay, so they plus. So that must mean they have some... I mean, we don't have lethal, so that might just mean they're hoping that Teferi survives or that we get greedy with our attacks, but like I said, I think just getting the knowledge of their hand off Valky is going to make a big difference here, because we can then effectively choose what our attacks are going to look like. So let's have a peek at their hand here. Okay, so they got Fateful Absence, Stifle, Discontinuity, and Archmage's Charm, which is, you know, that's pretty decent for us. It doesn't look like they've got really much going on, so we can guaranteed kill Teferi with the 2 Vanguards here, and we can just attack them directly. You know, the Vanguards both dodge Fateful Absence. We can put them down to 7 here, which is dead on board now. And then I think, you know, playing out Soul Herder here does make us more vulnerable to a sweeper off the top, but even if it's Wrath of God, Vanguard survives. The only card we get punished by here is Divine Purge. And I think considering the opponent has Fateful Absence, we're much better off getting more threats onto the battlefield, because it means that we can kill next turn more consistently, even if they draw more single target removal. So we'll see if they use the Fateful Absence here. They could Stifle the trigger, or they could Fateful Absence the Blood Mage here. I assume they have to do one of the two, considering their hand, you know, they'd need untap lands to Discontinuity to get another turn. They'd need Divine Purge to really stabilise. Wrath of God doesn't really do it here because we have the Vanguards. So they kind of need untap land or Divine Purge. You know, untap land for Discontinuity or Divine Purge. Okay, so they Lotus Field. Presumably they Stifle here then. And then I guess Portable Hole also does it. If they have Portable Hole, they can exile the Vanguard, and that takes us off lethal here. But other than that, or Settle the Wreckage as well, actually. But we haven't seen that at all yet, so I don't think we're going to play around it. Okay, so they obviously digging for Portable Hole. Doesn't look like they hit it, so we should win this then. Nice. Yeah, sweet. Okay, sweet, we get to go first here. And we can't keep a one lander. This looks better. You know, we've got 3 lands. Probably put back a Glass Pool Mimic here because we have enough lands already, and we want more Mimics in the deck for the captains as well. Play Godless Shrine tapped. We've got Valkyrie on turn 2. We got Apparition and Blood Mage on 3, so reasonable curve out here. See what the opponent's on. Okay, Spy Bluff Canal into Chandler, so almost definitely going to be Phoenix here, I'd imagine. Soul Herd is a great draw because we have Apparition plus Soul Herd is going to be great here. We've got Blood Mage to exile their graveyard, so oh wow, and we get to hit a Sprite Dragon with Valkyrie here. That's sick. That was really good. So yeah, I feel fairly confident with this now. You know, we've got, like I said, Apparition plus Soul Herder, so we can deal with Channeler and Sprite Dragon if Valkyrie dies. And then we also have Blood Mage to turn off Delirium and exile Phoenixes if they've been any. So we'd love for them to bin some Phoenixes here and just get free value off the Blood Mage. Because the one weakness, you know, Blood Mage is very good against Phoenix at shutting off Delirium, but the one weakness is once they've got 3 mana, if they start binning Phoenixes at that point, they're just going to come straight back from the graveyard before Blood Mage can do anything. Okay, so they pass with mana up here, which means they can Fading Hope. I still think I like going Apparition pre-combat here, because even if they Fading Hope the Apparition here, you know, they'll get a 1/1 token and then Valkyrie dies and they get Sprite Dragon back, but they bounce Apparition to our hand, so we then have a guaranteed way to kill the Sprite Dragon. You know, I'd be somewhat concerned if they didn't Fading Hope there, because that might mean that they have removal. I guess they don't know we have Soul Herder, but one potential bad position from there is if they killed the Apparition and then bounced the Valkyrie and played Sprite Dragon, we then have no way to kill the Sprite Dragon because they'd have killed the Apparition. So I'm glad they bounced the Apparition here, because we can basically just cleanly kill this Sprite Dragon, and that is a card that we need to kill. You know, we don't have that many blockers in the air, so killing Sprite Dragon here is really important. So I think I like playing the pathway out here. You know, there's a chance we might want to use this Mimic later, so I think we'll just play the pathway and just play the Apparition to kill the Sprite Dragon here. And then next turn we can either exile their graveyard with the Blood Mage, or if they play a threat like a Crackling Drake or something, we can just blink the Apparition with Soul Herder. And Apparition can kill pretty much any threat in their deck. You know, the only creature we don't want to see is Storming Entity, because that's obviously 5 mana, so Apparition can't kill it. But everything else we're pretty good against. Okay, so we're really hoping they don't hit Phoenixes in the grave here, because like I said, Blood Mage is great at clearing. Oh well, they do have Storming Entity. Okay, that's problematic. But yeah, like I was saying, I mean, to be honest, that's probably not as bad as them getting multiple Phoenixes in the bin. Okay, Valkyrie, not the best draw here. I think we'll take this opportunity to Blood Mage the graveyard, because it will turn off Delirium, and since they've only got 1 card in hand, it will shut off those Faithless Lootings they've got as well. And then, even though we can't blink the Apparition, well, we can blink the Apparition, but it won't kill anything. We can now start blinking the Blood Mage to either make 1/1s or... Okay, Phoenix. Oh wow, Release to the Wind, that's great. I don't think we can go Valkyrie Release to the Wind this time, because we need to use Valkyrie Release to the Wind to kill the Storming Entity. So we'll play Soul Herder. I think I was going to Valkyrie next turn initially, but I think we should probably Valkyrie now, just in case they had a creature. Unholy Heat isn't great to see, because that can kill Valkyrie, which is our only real way of beating the Storming Entity. But since they don't know we have Release to the Wind, they could very well use... Oh, okay, that's unlucky. I was hoping that they would use Unholy Heat on the apparition there because, you know, that seems like the obvious play to do. But now they've got Unholy Heat, we might be in trouble here because they can Unholy Heat the Valky in response to release. Oh wow, they're just Unholy Heating now. I guess they're just trying to force damage through. But I mean, that's great for us because we can now go release to the wind next turn. Yeah, I mean, if they'd held on to Unholy Heat, I think we'd have been in a really tough spot there. But now we can just release to the wind the Valky. And not only do we get to cast Tybalt here and exile the Storming Entity, but we also get to cast the Storming Entity because we cast Release to the Wind. We get the cost reduction off the Storming Entity as well. So the opponent playing Unholy Heat last turn was huge for us. But I guess, you know, from their point of view, the Valky was just doing nothing. You know, they didn't know we had Release to the Wind. So we'll just pass here. We can blink the Blood Mage. I don't think they've got enough in graveyard to be worried about that now. So I think we'll just make a 1/1 token. And then we've got Captain next turn. So yeah, this game's completely turned around now. That Release to the Wind was clutch. Yeah, sweet, nice. So against Phoenix, we definitely want Cerulean Drake. And we definitely want Grafdigger's Cage. Just thinking about Deputy of Detention, you know, that does also work as a temporary answer to Storming Entity, but having Deputy die to a removal spell and then getting Storming back and the Scry is really bad. So definitely going to cut Thoughtseize here. You know, it's not that great against Phoenix, and the fact that we lose 2 life from it is pretty bad, so yeah, like I said, I mean, I was thinking about Deputy, but I just don't think it's worth it. And I'm also thinking about that last game, you know, that turn that I played the Valky, I probably attacked a bit too hastily there because if they had more threats, we probably wanted creatures on the ground to block because we were at, what, 6 life when we won that one. So I think that turn we probably should have played Valky first, then Soul Herder, and then decide if we want to attack once we knew what was in their hand. But yeah, other than that, I think the Phoenix matchup feels a lot better with this particular build because we have Grafdigger's Cage. You know, the Bant Blink deck can't really afford to run Grafdigger's Cage because they also run Neo 4-man Collected Company. And, you know, like you saw in that game, Tybalt is sick as well. And yeah, Cerulean Drake really helps in this matchup as well because the biggest weakness of the Blink decks to Phoenix is the actual Arclight Phoenixes themselves. And Cerulean Drake just basically stops that avenue of attack completely. Now, annoyingly they are playing Storming Entity. You know, Storming Entity and Delver are the 2 threats that can attack around Cerulean Drake. But other than that, it's just going to block in the air all day against Sprite Dragons, Dragon's Rage Channelers, Arclight Phoenixes and Crackling Drake as well. So we're definitely going to play Cerulean Drake out here. The second one's nice as well because that means that we can, you know, they can't attack at all with Phoenixes even if they get multiple because we can either just block a couple of them individually or we can double block a single one. So our land last turn was a really nice draw as well. Obviously we really want to be hitting the 4th land for Captain here. And we just got to hope they don't have Entity here. Or Phoenix. Okay, they do. Phoenix isn't too bad because we've got the Cerulean Drake, but Storming Entity is going to be a bit of a problem here. I think we'll play Soul Herder here just because it's better mana efficiency. You know, we could have played the second Cerulean Drake out, but we're not really going to be blocking this Storming Entity, so I think for the better mana efficiency, it's probably better to go Soul Herder, and we can start putting counters on it as well, which means that unless they can hit Delirium or they use Unholy Heat this turn, we can go Soul Herder out of range of Unholy Heat and Pillar of Flame. Okay, wow. Double Phoenix is scary here. Yeah, maybe it was better to play the second Cerulean Drake out there because we're so much better against Phoenix with 2 Drakes on the battlefield because, like I said, we can double block. They're much less likely to attack. So, yeah, maybe it was correct to go second Cerulean Drake instead of Soul Herder there. Oh, wow, they go Sprite Dragon. Okay, so they didn't have a 3rd spell, and I don't think... Well, I don't think they meant to attack with Sprite Dragon there because they just lose it. But, I mean, we're happy to see that. And 4th land is great because we can go Captain and Blink it now. And we hit Valky with Release to the Wind in hand. Perfect. Okay, so now we have an answer to Storming Entity as well. Ha, they have Anger of the Gods. Okay, that's problematic. So I guess we're just hoping to hit Charming Prince off this Captain here. If we can hit Charming Prince, not only does Soul Herder become a 4/4, but we can also blink either Captain or Valky to avoid the sweeper. So, oh sweet, we got there. Nice. Okay, so do we want to blink the Captain or the Valky here? Honestly, I'm leaning more towards the Valky because Tybalt is kind of the only clean way we have of dealing with this Storming Entity. And with Release to the Wind, we really want to make use of that. The only problem with that is it does telegraph to the opponent pretty heavily that we have Release to the Wind. So they might just keep up Mystical Dispute here, and we can't really play around that. You know, we don't have... We need 6 mana to play around Dispute with Release to the Wind, so... The opponent could very well just hold open a blue mana here, which would be a problem. Whereas if we just blink the Captain, they're much more likely to just play the Anger of the Gods there, I think. Okay, maybe they're just trying to bring back the Phoenixes then. So we'll see. They probably... I mean, if they cast Looting here, we definitely get to resolve the Release to the Wind. We can exile the Storming Entity, and we'd love to draw another land here, because if we draw our 5th land, we can release the Valky, exile the Storming Entity, and then either cast the Storming Entity or cast the second Cerulean Drake, which would be huge. So since we can blink the Charming Prince to gain life here, I think we can afford to just block one of the Phoenixes. See what the last card in their hand is. Okay, it's just a land. So we'll release to the Wind the Valky here. Oh. Yeah, okay, I'm an idiot. I did that too quickly. I should have attacked with the Valky first there, but... Yeah, just playing too quickly there. I definitely should have attacked with the Valky first, but... Hopefully that won't matter. And then we'll blink the Charming Prince here to gain 3 life. Just to put us out of, you know, Phoenix plus Pillar of Flame range. And then I think we should be decent. You know, they can kill the Tybalt here, but they're dead on board. I'm really hoping that missed 2 damage off the Valky won't make a difference. Because yeah, that was just me playing too quickly. I definitely should have attacked first with the Valky and then gone Release to the Winds, main phase 2. Okay, they're looting. I mean, that's a pretty good sign for us. Okay, they play another entity. I mean, that's surely not an issue here. Yeah, sweet, we got there. Nice.